Right now, close your mouth. Let your teeth separate slightly. Let your tongue rest. Breathe in through your nose, and then make one low, steady hum for as long as the air lasts. Do not sing. Do not force it. Just turn the exhale into vibration. Feel where the signal goes. It begins in the throat, but it does not stay there. It moves into the jaw, behind the nose, through the cheekbones, into the skull, and down through the chest like a small motor bolted to a larger frame. That is not a metaphor. It is a mechanical event. For 60 seconds, your brain is not merely hearing a sound. It is receiving a controlled vibration from inside the body, synchronized with a slow exhale, carried through bone, air, pressure, blood vessels, nerves, and fluid-filled sensory chambers. The same action that looks almost childish from the outside becomes from the inside a multi-channel signal generator, a pressure wave, a breath regulator, a nitric oxide pump, a vagal timing pulse, a self-produced auditory loop, a brake applied to a nervous system that normally runs too fast because the modern world keeps feeding it input with no rhythm, 1 note, 1 minute, several machines. The first machine is the larynx. When you hum, 2 elastic folds of tissue inside the voice box move toward each other until the outgoing air has to squeeze through a narrow slit. The pressure below the folds rises, the folds are pushed apart, air escapes, pressure drops, the folds snap back, then the cycle repeats. If the hum is low, the vibration may be near 100 Hz. If the hum is higher, it may be 200 Hz or more. That means the tissue in your throat can open and close more than 100 times every second, not because you consciously command each movement, but because air pressure and tissue elasticity create a self-oscillating valve. It is a biological reed valve. Your brain sets the approximate tension. The physics does the rest. The vocal folds do not need a separate command for each cycle, any more than a whistle needs a separate command for each ripple of sound. Once the geometry, pressure, and tension are correct, vibration becomes automatic. A continuous exhale turns into a pulsed pressure wave. That wave travels upward through the vocal tract. But because your mouth is closed, the energy does not leave the body efficiently as ordinary speech. It is trapped, redirected, and amplified in the resonant cavities of the throat, mouth, nose, and skull. Your head becomes a resonator. This is the first reason humming feels different from speaking. Speech is designed to throw information outward. Humming keeps more of the vibration inside the frame. The lips are closed, the jaw is relaxed, and the soft palate changes the acoustic pathway, so the nasal cavity becomes part of the circuit. The sound wave no longer behaves like a simple message sent into the room. It behaves like pressure moving through connected chambers. Your sinuses, nasal passages, oral cavity, pharynx, and skull bones are not passive surfaces. They reflect, damp, and transmit vibration. Some frequencies die quickly. Others are reinforced. The body selects. You feel the selected frequencies as internal buzzing. The brain receives this through more than one route. The ordinary route is airborne sound, entering the ear canal, moving the eardrum, driving the ossicles of the middle ear, and sending a pressure wave into the cochlea. But humming also uses bone conduction. The bones of the skull vibrate directly, and that vibration reaches the inner ear without needing the same external pathway. This is why your own hum can feel larger inside your head than it sounds to another person standing nearby. The microphone outside hears a soft tone. Your nervous system receives a structural vibration. The skull is part of the speaker. Inside the cochlea, fluid movement bends hair cells. Mechanical displacement becomes electrical signal. Potassium ions move. Receptor potentials change. Auditory nerve fibers fire. The brainstem receives timing information measured in fractions of milliseconds. The auditory cortex receives pitch, loudness, and texture. But because the sound is self-generated, the brain does not treat it like an unexpected external threat. The motor system has already sent a command to produce the hum, and with that command comes a prediction, an internal copy, of what the sound should be. Neuroscience calls this an efference copy. Engineering would call it a feed-forward signal. The brain predicts the noise before it arrives. That matters. A sudden sound from the outside can trigger orienting circuits, startle reflexes, and threat detection. A self-generated hum arrives with a label attached. Produced by me, expected, continuous, stable. The auditory cortex still processes it, but the alarm value is reduced. The brain does not need to solve where the sound came from. It does not need to rotate attention toward the environment. It can lock onto a known signal with a regular frequency and low surprise. The machinery shifts from scanning to tracking. Scanning is expensive. Tracking is cheaper. During 60 seconds of humming, the sound becomes an anchor signal. not because it has mystical content, because it is predictable. The nervous system is built to spend energy on change. A stable tone gives the brain a repeating waveform. A waveform can be anticipated. The more accurately a signal can be anticipated, the less emergency computation is required. This is one reason repetitive sound can feel stabilizing. It reduces prediction error. It gives the cortex a pattern that does not need to be hunted, but the sound is only the surface layer. The second machine is the breath. You cannot hum while inhaling in the ordinary way. A hum is normally built on an exhale. That means the moment you begin humming, you force the respiratory system into a different timing pattern. The exhale becomes longer, smoother, and more controlled. Instead of dumping air out quickly, the glottis and vocal tract impose resistance. The respiratory pump now moves like a hydraulic system with a narrowed outlet. Pressure falls more slowly. Flow becomes regulated. The diaphragm rises with restraint. The rib cage recoils with less abrupt motion. The exhale is no longer just air leaving. It is metered release. If you hum for 60 seconds, you may only complete 6 to 8 breathing cycles. That places the system near a rhythm of roughly 5 to 8 breaths per minute. At 6 breaths per minute, the breathing cycle is 10 seconds long. That equals 0.1 hertz. This number matters because the cardiovascular system has its own reflex timing. Blood pressure sensors in the carotid sinus and aortic arch constantly measure stretch in the vessel walls. When pressure rises, these sensors fire more strongly. The brainstem responds by adjusting heart rate and vessel tone. This pressure control loop is called the baroreflex. The baroreflex is a pressure governor. When breathing slows toward 0.1 Hz, the respiratory rhythm can begin to synchronize with this pressure control loop. Not perfectly in every person, and not equally every day, but often strongly enough to measure. Heart rate speeds slightly during inhalation, and slows during exhalation. This natural oscillation is respiratory sinus arrhythmia. It is not an error in the heart, it is a timing feature. During a long hum, exhalation lengthens, and the parasympathetic brake on the heart can become more visible in the rhythm of the pulse. The heart is not simply beating, it is being phase modulated. At the molecular level, the braking signal uses the vagus nerve. Vagal fibers release acetylcholine onto pacemaker cells in the sinoatrial node. Acetylcholine binds mainly to M2 muscarinic receptors. This changes G-protein signaling, opens potassium channels, and makes pacemaker cells less likely to fire quickly. In mechanical language, the slope of the pacemaker voltage ramp becomes shallower. The heart still runs. The oscillator slows. The circuit does not shut down. It retunes. This is not relaxation as a mood. It is electrical timing. Now the brain is involved again because the vagus nerve is not only an output wire. Most of its fibers carry information inward from the body to the brain. Signals from the larynx, lungs, heart, gut, and blood pressure sensors converge in brainstem regions that function like central control stations. One of the major relay stations is the nucleus tractus solitarius, the NTS. This structure receives visceral input and helps coordinate respiratory, cardiovascular, and autonomic output. It is one of the places where the brain learns what state the body is in before the conscious mind has a story about it. Your brain reads the body before you read yourself. A long humming exhale changes the pattern arriving at that station. Stretch receptors in the lungs report slower emptying. Baroreceptors report rhythmic pressure waves. Laryngeal sensory fibers report vibration and airflow. Auditory pathways report a stable, internally generated tone. Facial and jaw proprioceptors report low muscular movement, rather than chewing, speaking, or defensive clenching. None of these signals alone has to be dramatic. The power is in their alignment. Multiple sensors report the same thing: rhythmic, controlled, non-emergency output. The control room receives coherent telemetry. That coherence matters because the brain is a prediction machine tied to a body. If the body reports irregular breath, clenched jaw, rapid heart rate, and sharp external sound, the brain has to solve a high alert state. If the body reports slow exhale, stable tone, predictable vibration, and falling respiratory drive, the brain has a different state to solve. It can reduce the gain on threat circuits. It can reduce motor readiness. It can let attention narrow. This does not require belief. It requires input. The nervous system does not obey slogans. It obeys signals. But there is a third machine operating through the same hum, and it sits behind the nose. The paranasal sinuses are not empty architectural mistakes in the skull. They are air-filled cavities connected to the nasal passages through small openings. Their geometry is narrow, irregular, and difficult to ventilate under ordinary quiet breathing. They also produce nitric oxide, a small gas molecule with large biological consequences. Nitric oxide is not just a pollutant in exhaust chemistry. In the body, it is a signaling molecule. It diffuses through membranes, it activates soluble guanylate cyclase. That raises cyclic GMP. Smooth muscle relaxes. Blood vessels change diameter. Cilia and airway surfaces are influenced. Immune defense is affected. A gas becomes a control signal. When you hum, the oscillating pressure waves move through the nasal cavity and create rapid gas exchange between the sinuses and the nasal airway. In 2002, Eddie Weitzberg and John Lundberg at the Karolinska Institute measured nasal nitric oxide during humming and quiet exhalation in 10 healthy subjects. They used chemiluminescence detection, not a mood survey. During humming, nasal nitric oxide increased 15-fold compared with quiet exhalation at the same fixed flow. They also built a two-compartment model resembling the nose and sinuses, and the oscillating airflow greatly increased exchange between the compartments. That is the pump. The hum does not manufacture a miracle. It ventilates a reservoir. The sinuses are producing nitric oxide, and the oscillating wave helps move that gas into the nasal airflow. The effect is mechanical before it is biochemical. Vibrating air increases mixing. Mixing changes measured gas concentration. The molecule then enters the airway stream where it may influence local vessel tone, ciliary activity, and antimicrobial defense. The evidence is strongest for the immediate nasal nitric oxide increase and the sinus ventilation mechanism. Claims beyond that require calibration. A 60-second hum does not prove a clinical treatment. It does not sterilize the airway. It does not replace medicine. It demonstrates that a small acoustic pressure wave can change gas movement in the skull. The skull has plumbing. Now place these three machines together. The larynx generates vibration. The breath slows into a metered exhale. The sinuses exchange nitric oxide-rich air with the nasal cavity. The heart rhythm begins to couple more visibly to breathing. The vagus nerve carries body state information into the brainstem. The auditory system receives a predictable internal tone. The cortex receives less surprise. The body is not being talked into calm. It is being driven into a different operating mode by timing, pressure, and feedback. This is why 60 seconds can matter. Not because the brain is transformed permanently in 1 minute. That claim would be too large. 60 seconds is enough time to impose several cycles of slow respiratory timing. Enough time to generate thousands of vocal fold oscillations. Enough time to expose the auditory system to a stable internally produced frequency. Enough time to create measurable nasal nitric oxide changes during the hum. Enough time for heart period to begin following the breath more strongly in people whose cardiovascular system responds well to slow breathing. The shift may be small, but small does not mean vague. A millivolt is small. A receptor current is small. A pressure wave is small. Control systems are built from small signals. There is also a fourth layer, attention. Humming occupies the speech machinery without producing language. That is a rare state. The mouth, tongue, larynx, diaphragm, auditory cortex, and motor planning systems are active, but they are not assembling sentences. The brain's language network is not forced to chase words. The prefrontal system is not composing explanations. The mouth is busy, but the story engine is partially starved. You cannot argue internally with the same efficiency while sustaining a steady hum, because the machinery of vocal output is engaged in a nonverbal task. The channel is occupied. This does not mean thoughts vanish. It means the motor and sensory loops that normally support inner speech have a competing task. Inner speech is not just abstract thought floating in space. It borrows from vocal planning, auditory prediction, and timing circuits. When you hum, you place a low-bandwidth carrier signal across that system. The brain can still think, but some of the circuitry used for verbal rumination is now synchronized to breath and vibration. In engineering terms, the noise floor changes. The dominant signal becomes simpler. One tone replaces many fragments. The hum also gives attention a physical target. You can track the buzz at the lips. You can track the pressure behind the nose. You can track the vibration in the sternum. You can track the fading air column as the exhale runs out. These sensations are interoceptive and proprioceptive. They come from inside the body and from the position and motion of tissues. The insula, somatosensory cortex, brainstem, and thalamic relays all participate in mapping body state. When a signal is rhythmic and self-generated, the map becomes easier to stabilize. The brain is given a ruler. A ruler does not change the object being measured. It lets the system detect variation. If the hum wobbles, you hear it. If the breath jerks, you feel it. If the jaw tightens, the vibration changes. If the nose is blocked, the resonance shifts. Humming turns normally hidden internal states into audible and tactile feedback. It is primitive biofeedback without a screen. The body generates the signal, the brain measures the signal, and the next breath adjusts based on the measurement. Loop closed. The instrument is built into the body. This is where many explanations become too soft. They say humming calms you because it is soothing. That is not an explanation. A music box is soothing to some people and irritating to others. The mechanism has to be stated. Humming changes exhalation resistance. It extends respiratory timing. It produces predictable auditory input. It vibrates structures innervated by cranial nerves. It increases sinus-nasal gas exchange. It gives the brain a stable interoceptive object. It can push breathing toward the frequency range, where heart rate variability is often amplified. Those are mechanisms. The feeling comes later. The machine moves first. The feeling follows. In 2011, B.G. Kalyani and colleagues used functional MRI to study the neural correlates of chanting, OM. This was not identical to neutral humming, and the difference matters. OM includes a cognitive and cultural component, and the sound pattern is not the same as a simple closed-mouth hum. But the study still offers one useful piece of evidence because it examined a vocal vibration practice inside a brain scanner. The researchers reported deactivation in limbic regions during OM chanting, and they noted similarity to patterns seen in vagus nerve stimulation research. This does not prove that every 60-second hum deactivates the same circuits. It shows that vocal vibration practices can be associated with measurable changes in brain networks involved in emotional salience. That is, evidence with boundaries. A later pilot study on simple Brahmari humming examined heart rate variability during humming compared with other states. It was small, and small studies should not be inflated into laws, but its results fit the mechanism. Humming was associated with increased parasympathetic markers and changes in stress-related HRV measures. The stronger foundation, however, is not any single modern lifestyle claim. The stronger foundation is the physiology already known from slow breathing, respiratory sinus arrhythmia, baroreflex timing, vagal signaling, and nasal nitric oxide measurement. Humming sits at the intersection of those systems. It is not one effect, it is a convergence. Now think of the brain after 10 seconds. The first exhale has slowed, the auditory system has locked onto the tone, the facial muscles have reduced unnecessary movement, the larynx is oscillating, the nasal cavity is vibrating, the chest wall is sending pressure feedback, the brainstem is receiving a breath pattern that is more regular than the one you had a moment before. The signal is still fragile. The system has not yet shifted deeply, but the input is changed. At 20 seconds, the second cycle begins to matter. The heart is not responding to one isolated breath. It is beginning to follow a repeated pattern. The baroreflex loop works through time, not intention. Pressure sensors need cycles. Respiratory sinus arrhythmia becomes more visible when breathing is slow and regular. If the hum is steady, the exhale is no longer a random leak. It is a controlled ramp. The brainstem receives rhythm rather than scatter. At 30 seconds, attention has fewer places to go. The tone fills the auditory field from inside. The vibration gives the somatosensory system a repeated pulse. The mouth is closed. The breath is constrained. The motor system has a simple job: maintain pitch, pressure, and airflow. The prefrontal cortex, which often behaves like a manager trying to solve 10 unsolved problems at once, is given one measurable task: hold the signal. At 40 seconds, carbon dioxide may rise slightly compared with shallow overbreathing, depending on how you started. This matters because breathing is not controlled mainly by oxygen in healthy resting conditions. It is strongly regulated by carbon dioxide and pH. Chemoreceptors monitor the chemical state of the blood and cerebrospinal fluid. Slow, controlled breathing does not mean starving the brain. It means reducing chaotic ventilation. The hum discourages fast dumping of carbon dioxide. The system becomes less jagged. At 50 seconds, the hum has become less like a sound and more like a carrier wave. You may notice that the tone wants to find one frequency where the face vibrates more strongly. That is resonance. Every cavity and tissue structure has frequencies. It transmits more efficiently. You are not inventing the sensation. You are tuning a biological chamber. The sinuses, nasal cavity, oral cavity, and skull bones respond differently depending on pitch. A lower hum may sit in the chest and throat. A slightly higher one may concentrate behind the nose and lips. The body filters the waveform. At 60 seconds, nothing supernatural has occurred. The brain has simply spent 1 minute inside a different input environment. Slow exhale, internal vibration, predictable sound, reduced speech, altered sinus gas exchange, and stronger body state feedback. That is enough to change the immediate operating conditions, not enough to promise healing, not enough to override trauma, disease, or chronic stress by itself, but enough to show that the brain is not sealed inside the skull, thinking its way through life. It is wired into pressure, vibration, chemistry, and rhythm. The brain is not only an electrical organ, it is a mechanically informed organ. This becomes clearer if you compare humming with silent thinking. Silent thinking can run without any external rhythm. It can accelerate, it can loop, it can become recursive. One thought produces another thought, and the body may follow with shallow breathing, neck tension, jaw compression, and irregular heartbeat. The brain then reads that body state and interprets it as evidence that something is wrong. The loop closes in the wrong direction. Thought changes body. Body confirms thought. The oscillator becomes unstable. Humming interrupts that loop at the body level. It does not debate the thought. It changes the telemetry. The jaw loosens because the hum works better when the mouth is not clenched. The exhale lengthens because the tone needs air. The auditory field stabilizes because the sound is continuous. The larynx vibrates because the vocal folds are engaged. The nasal cavity resonates because the mouth is closed. The heart receives a slower respiratory rhythm. The brainstem receives a different pattern of afferent input. The cortex receives a signal that is steady and self-produced. No argument is required. The vagus nerve deserves precision here, because it is often turned into a slogan. It is not a magic, calm cable. It is cranial nerve X, a mixed nerve with sensory and motor fibers, branching through the throat, heart, lungs, and digestive tract. It innervates parts of the larynx through the superior and recurrent laryngeal nerves. It carries parasympathetic output to the heart. It carries visceral information back toward the brainstem. When people say humming stimulates the vagus nerve, the exact statement should be narrower. Humming engages structures connected to vagal pathways, changes breathing in ways that alter vagal cardiac output, and may increase afferent body state signaling through brainstem circuits. Direct measurement of vagal firing from a 60-second hum in ordinary humans is not the same thing as measuring heart rate variability or subjective calm. The distinction matters. A wire can be inferred from the circuit, but inference is not the same as direct probe measurement. The physiology supports the connection. The direct evidence is still more limited than the popular claim. That does not make the mechanism false. It makes it calibrated. The most honest version is also the most interesting. Humming is a simple behavior that touches the vagal system through several gates at once: laryngeal sensation, respiratory timing, cardiac parasympathetic modulation, and brainstem interoception. It is not pressing one button. It is shifting a network. Networks respond to pattern. There is another overlooked piece. Humming reduces the need for visual attention. When the sound and vibration are internal, the eyes do not need to search for the source. The orienting system can downshift. In many people, the eyelids naturally soften or close. Once visual scanning drops, the brain receives fewer rapid environmental updates. Modern attention is often dominated by high-frequency visual cuts, screens, notifications, faces, text, movement, threat cues, novelty. Humming supplies the opposite type of input: low novelty, high continuity, slow breath, internal origin. That is a different sensory economy. The thalamus, often described as a relay station, participates in regulating what sensory information reaches the cortex. The reticular activating system helps set arousal. The locus coeruleus broadcasts norepinephrine and influences alertness, scanning, and gain. The amygdala assigns salience to threat and emotional relevance. The NTS feeds body state information into this wider network. Humming does not seize control of these structures like a drug binding, a receptor with high affinity. It biases their input conditions. It changes the rhythm of the signals arriving from below. A brain state is not commanded. It is negotiated. The negotiation is physical. The diaphragm, intercostal muscles, larynx, nasal cavity, heart, blood vessels, and brainstem all contribute votes. Humming gives many of them the same ballot. Slow down the exhale. Stabilize the tone, reduce surprise, increase internal feedback, couple heart and breath, ventilate the sinuses, occupy speech without language, feed the cortex a predictable waveform. None of these votes alone has to win. Together they can move the state. This is why the effect can be immediate but inconsistent. If your nose is blocked, the nasal resonance changes. If your throat is tight, the laryngeal vibration is strained. If you force the pitch, the system becomes effortful. If you hum too loudly, the motor demand increases. If you are panicked, 60 seconds may be too short to dominate the existing alarm loop. If you are relaxed already, the change may be subtle. Biology is not a switchboard with identical settings in every person. It is an adaptive control system, with history, fatigue, inflammation, posture, sleep, and expectation built into the baseline. The same input enters different machines, but the core physics remains. A hum is air pressure converted into vibration. Vibration becomes sensory signal. Slow exhale becomes autonomic timing. Nasal oscillation becomes gas exchange. Repetition becomes prediction. Prediction reduces surprise. Reduced surprise lowers computational demand. The brain is not floating above the body, deciding whether to be calm. It is continuously estimating the body's condition from incoming data. Change the data stream, and the estimate can change. This is the hard mechanical version of calm. Consider the vocal folds again. In 60 seconds at 120 Hz, they can complete 7,200 cycles. At 180 Hz, 10,800 cycles. That is thousands of pressure pulses generated by tissue you are barely aware of controlling. The pulses move through air spaces measured in centimeters, through bones measured in millimeters of vibrating displacement, through cochlear fluid where hair cells convert motion into neural code, through respiratory circuits timing the next breath, through cardiovascular reflexes, adjusting milliseconds between heartbeats. The scale changes from whole-body breath to microscopic ion channels. The same hum spans all of it. Macro pressure, micro current. This is what the brain is built to integrate. It takes mechanical vibration and turns it into hearing. It takes vessel stretch and turns it into autonomic correction. It takes lung inflation and turns it into respiratory timing. It takes chemical concentration and turns it into drive to breathe. It takes muscle tension and turns it into posture. Then it fuses those streams into one felt state so smoothly that you call it how I feel instead of a real-time control estimate generated by multiple sensor arrays. The label is simple, the machinery is not. A 60-second hum also changes the boundary between voluntary and automatic control. You choose to start, you choose the note, you choose to continue, but once the hum is running, much of the system operates below conscious command. The vocal fold oscillation is automatic. The baroreflex is automatic. The chemoreflex is automatic. The cochlear transduction is automatic. The NTS integration is automatic. The heart's pacemaker cells do not wait for belief. The cilia in the airway do not wait for interpretation. The nitric oxide molecule does not know whether you are spiritual, skeptical, distracted, or bored. Physics does not need your opinion. That is the cleanest part of the story. Humming is not powerful because it carries a special meaning. It is powerful because it is a simple way to force several hidden systems into a shared rhythm. Meaning can be added by culture, ritual, memory, or music. But the base layer is older than meaning. Air through tissue, tissue into vibration, vibration into nerve signal, breath into pressure rhythm into heart timing into brainstem feedback. Brainstem feedback into arousal regulation. The body understands before language arrives. There is a reason infants are soothed by low repetitive vocal sound before they understand words. There is a reason people hum when they concentrate, when they are afraid, when they are alone, when they are trying to hold themselves steady. The behavior may appear casual, but casual behaviors often survive because they exploit real machinery. The body discovers useful control loops long before science names them. Later, instruments arrive. Chemiluminescence measures, nitric oxide, ECG measures, heart intervals, fMRI measures, blood oxygen changes, respiratory belts measure timing. The ancient behavior is not validated by being ancient, it is clarified by measurement. Measurement strips away exaggeration. It also strips away dismissal. Humming is easy to dismiss because it is small. The modern mind expects strong interventions to look complex, expensive, or external. A pill has chemistry. A device has circuitry. A scanner has magnets. A hum has none of that visible machinery. But the absence of external hardware does not mean the absence of mechanism. The hardware is internal. The oscillator is the larynx. The amplifier is the skull. The pump is the breath. The gas reservoir is the sinus system. The pressure sensor is the baroreflex. The communication line is the vagus nerve. The processor is the brainstem. The display is consciousness. You are built from instruments you rarely notice. The evidence calibration is simple. The 15-fold nitric oxide increase during humming is directly measured in a small human study and mechanically supported by modeling. The link between slow breathing near 0.1 Hz and increased heart rate variability is supported by a larger breathing physiology literature. Respiratory sinus arrhythmia is a known heart-breath coupling phenomenon. Vagal afferent input to the NTS is established anatomy and physiology. The claim that 1 minute of humming permanently rewires the brain is not established. The claim that humming can immediately alter the input conditions of the brain is much stronger. That is enough. Enough to explain why the brain can feel different after 60 seconds. Enough to explain why the effect is not imaginary, even when it is modest. Enough to explain why the action is not merely sound. It is a controlled perturbation applied to a living control system. In engineering, a perturbation is how you reveal a system. You tap a structure and listen for resonance. You inject a signal into a circuit and watch the output. You change pressure in a pipe and measure flow. Humming does this from inside the organism. You tap the nervous system from within, and the tap is unusually clean because it is self-generated. External sound can be rejected as noise. External instruction can be resisted. External touch can be threatening, but a hum made by your own body arrives with internal permission. The brain knows the motor command. It predicts the sensory return. It marks the signal as self-produced. This lowers the defensive value of the input. The nervous system is more willing to integrate a signal it generated itself. Self-generated rhythm is a privileged signal. That does not make it universally pleasant. Some people dislike the sensation. Some feel pressure in the face. Some notice tinnitus more sharply. Some become aware of breath restriction. Some with certain respiratory, neurological, or voice conditions may need caution. A mechanism can be real without being ideal for everybody. The correct conclusion is not that everyone must hum. The correct conclusion is that humming reveals how deeply the brain is tied to vibration, breath, and pressure. The mind is not separate from acoustics. Return to the 60 seconds. The first thing you felt was probably the buzz. That was the obvious layer. But beneath it, your vocal folds were running a high-speed valve. Your exhale was being lengthened by resistance. Your nasal cavities were being shaken into better gas exchange. Nitric oxide was being moved from sinus spaces toward the nasal airway. Your heart rhythm may have begun to widen its breath-linked oscillation. Your vagus nerve pathways were involved in both output and incoming body state information. Your auditory cortex was processing a predictable self-made tone. Your speech machinery was occupied without language. Your attention was given a physical waveform instead of a verbal loop. The hum was not one event. It was a stack. This is what really happens to your brain when you hum for 60 seconds. The brain is placed inside a different body. Not a different body in anatomy, but a different body in signal pattern. Slower breath, lower surprise. Stronger internal vibration, more coherent pressure rhythm, less verbal output, more interoceptive feedback. The brain then does what it always does. It estimates the state of the organism from the signals it receives. For 1 minute, those signals become simpler, slower, and more rhythmic. That is why the room can feel quieter after the sound stops. The silence after humming is not empty, it is contrast. The auditory system has been tracking a stable tone, and now the tone is gone. The breath has been paced, and now the respiratory system continues with some remaining inertia. The face has been vibrating, and now the tissues are still. The brain notices the absence of the waveform it had just learned to predict. Silence becomes measurable because vibration made it visible. The machine keeps echoing after the motor stops. You felt this at the beginning, before any explanation. A low note, a closed mouth, a slow exhale, and a pressure wave moving through bone. It seemed too small to matter because the action was familiar, but familiar does not mean simple. Under the skin, the hum touched valves, sensors, oscillators, gas reservoirs, ion channels, cranial nerves, blood pressure loops, and brainstem relays. It did not ask the brain to believe anything. It changed the signal entering the system. 1 minute of humming is not an escape from biology. It is biology, briefly becoming audible.